Ooh, you got me just so crazy over you. We love Madonna, we love Madonna, we love Madonna, we love Madonna.
Hi, this is James Foley, and you're listening to MLVC, the Madonna podcast, your place for all things Madonna, Louise, Veronica, Giacone.
And hey everybody, it's Liberty. I'm keeping my baby.
Ooh, very appropriate. Hey everybody, it's Stefan. Thanks for joining us for another episode of MLVC. As you heard, today on the show we have a very special guest, James Foley, who not only directed Madonna in 3 iconic music videos, but also helmed her wonderfully wacky 1987 comedy, Who's That Girl? James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I cannot tell you how good it feels to hear Who's That Girl referred to as wonderful, because at the time it was released, but thank God I've lived long enough that something has become iconic and magically turned from a flop into a classic. It pleases me.
And that is true, actually. I will say we are very excited because we've been doing a Madonna summer movie series, and for this summer we're focusing on her 80s movies. So we've done Desperately Seeking Susan, Shanghai Surprise, and our last summer movie will be Who's That Girl? And we're so excited because it is one of our favorite all-time Madonna movies. I know it was not well received when it first came out, but I have loved it since 1987 when I saw it, and I have watched it way too many times.
Yeah. Same goes for me. I mean, I have to say, as a little 10-year-old at the time that Who's That Girl was released, I was like, this is the greatest movie I think I've ever seen.
Wow.
And
it's like heroin onto like a pain that lasted for decades until suddenly I go on YouTube, which is owned by Google, surprise, surprise, and they know everything about me, and they start showing me videos I might be interested in, and suddenly, like, Who's That Girl is present in the culture in 2022, and nothing's better than that, money or reviews or anything, for something to become iconic is the highest success.
Yeah, absolutely. James, before we get to ask you some questions, Liberty, do you want to give James a bio just in case there's anyone out there listening who might not know your storied career?
Sure, with absolute pleasure. So James Foley is an American film director who had his directing debut in 1984. Since then, he's worked with top names in Hollywood movies, television, even some music videos. His 1986 film At Close Range was entered into the 36th Berlin International Film Festival, and some of his most well-known movies have been Glengarry Glen Ross, Fear with Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon, and the 2 sequels to 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades Darker, and 50 Shades Freed. So absolute honor to speak with you today, Mr. Foley.
Thank you. Feel good.
So let's get started. I mean, I'm just going to kind of dive right in. How did you get involved in filmmaking?
I went undergrad and graduated from SUNY Buffalo with a degree in psychology and a preparation to go to medical school to become a certified shrink. But I made that decision after I graduated, and I had to wait. And at the moment, cinema was kind of in the air, and film schools were. And I was born in Brooklyn, so I'm proud of that, but I did grow up in Staten Island. And I took a 6-week course at NYU with the storied Professor Haig Manoogian, which was just as a hobby to try to see what everybody had to go out with a little wind-up camera, and you had like half a day to shoot something. I went over to Washington Square Park, and there was a sandbox, and I did something which today I'd be in prison for. There were little girls playing in the sandbox, and so I got down on their level with my camera to shoot them. I didn't know what I was doing, just trying to get the camera to work. And then I looked through and I saw these big masculine hands come into the frame and pick the child up, understandably.
Right.
And then, then we would screen the films the next day, and whose ever 1 minute film didn't break in the projector was usually the best one. But mine came up, and when that image happened where this child got the class of about 30 students in unison went, oh, and it was an experience I had never felt before, where you do something, don't tell anybody I didn't know what I was doing, but where people react in unison. And it was, no exaggeration, like having an orgasm for the first time without knowing that was possible.
Right.
Yeah.
and having the same reaction, which is, let's do that again.
Right.
And so then I just forgot about becoming a shrink, and I wanted to go to film school. And I decided I wanted to go to Hollywood. So instead of going to NYU, I went to the Harvard of Film Schools, USC Cinema, which was the most life-changing 3 years of my life. I have such affection, and that really got me going. And ironically, just last week, I got a copy of my student thesis film.
Oh, nice.
Got me in the door, like in high res. I couldn't believe it. So I was very lucky through a lot of different things. I won't get into every detail, but that film was good enough. And then socially, I had met people through this guy named Josh Donnan, whose father was a famous director, Stanley Donnan, who did Singing in the Rain and Two for the Road. And Josh, who was the sound man of my movie, subsequently became one of David Fincher's agents at CAA. Then David said, why don't you leave CAA and just be my agent, which he did, which turned into Josh being a producer on House of Cards and David's movies and stuff like that. So everything sort of started at USC, and it still all goes back there.
Yeah.
And for your directorial debut, we're fast forwarding after you've graduated, you're in the film world. Your directorial debut was Reckless, starring a very young Aidan Quinn and Daryl Hannah. Aidan would go on to co-star in Desperately Seeking Susan, which was Madonna's first starring role in Hollywood. So 2 questions. Did you see Aidan's star quality back then to know that he would be this actor working in Hollywood still to this day? And second question, did you get to see Desperately Seeking Susan prior to Who's That Girl?
Aidan was, and it all does come back to Madonna, because when I was casting for Reckless, and I was cool, and I lived across the street from Cantor's Deli on Fairfax, if you're aware of that. So I would have my meetings with these actors, and I met all these guys for the part, which included Tom Cruise and Sean Penn and a bunch of guys, Emilio, the Brat Pack, all those people. And Sean was rejected, although to this day he will contest that, that I rejected him. But I couldn't find the guy that I wanted. And at the last minute, I get this really crazy, I guess, VHS tape from somehow this guy, Aidan Quinn, and he was like all over the place, had absolutely no acting discipline, but he communicated a feeling that I learned throughout my life that that's the most important thing. An actor coming in for a reading, and if they're technically prepared and have made these choices, it's boring because it's their thing. It's when the actor comes in, it doesn't matter if they're way off course, but if they make you feel something, then that's the person. And that was Aidan. Yeah. And then there was Daryl.
Yeah.
Where is Daryl? Is she still married to Neil Young? Am I making that up?
Were they married? I didn't know they were married.
I don't know if they were.
They were together, yeah.
Oh, wow.
But she went on to do interesting things, like be a mermaid.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still trying to convince my kids to watch that movie. They're 14 and 11, so they're definitely not interested in anything mermaid related. But I've been on like an 80s film thing with them because, again, you get this sort of new generation thing. And I did have them watch Who's That Girl, but we'll get to that at some point. Well, your second feature film after Reckless then was At Close Range with an incredible cast, including Christopher Walken, Mary Stuart Masterson, Kiefer Sutherland, and Sean Penn. So what was it like? I mean, at that point, working with this large swath of talented actors.
I had no idea I was doing that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, to condense the story, because it all reflects back to Madame M. I had met Sean for Reckless when I rejected him, but somehow we connected and became friends. And at the time, his girlfriend was Pam Springsteen, Bruce's younger. Mm-hmm. And then they broke up, and typical Sean, he had nowhere to live. And I'd bought this house I'm still in, but I had practically no furniture. And he asked me if he could crash on my couch for a couple of days. Well, those couple of days turned into a year and a half. And
wow.
During that time, I had made Reckless, which came out and was not successful. And I'll never forget Sean calling me after he had gone to see it with his new girlfriend from Downton Abbey, Elizabeth McGovern.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget Sean said, yeah, we saw it, we didn't like it. And I think about that a lot because it somehow was not at all hurtful. But also then, so he was just getting hot. He was on the cover of Rolling Stone for some reason. Anyway, Sean was on the cover of Rolling Stone. But so when I met him, he was not famous. But then he became famous. And I'll never forget that experience. And during the time he's on my couch, two important things happened. One was that Elliot Lewitt, now deceased, the producer, and Nick Kazan, the writer, wanted Sean to do At Close Range. And Sean read it, and Sean said he would do it if I would direct it. Now, from their point of view, I was the director of Reckless and had no calling card, but to this day, and if I tear up sometimes, it's because the whole plague has turned me into a raw, emotional thing.
You and me both.
Just
Don't worry about
Me
it.
too.
Because finally, 50 years later, I better do it in case Sean ever hears this, I have never really thanked him because he just stuck to his guns. I will not do it unless he's the director.
Wow.
And if he hadn't done that, what would have been? I would not have gotten a script like that. And the second important thing that happened is lying on my couch watching the TV, and a video came on, and Sean said, because Sean was friends with Steve Zalian, if you know him, he's one of the biggest screenwriters, Schindler's List and all this stuff. And he was friends with Sean, and Steve Zalian's sister-in-law was the second AD on the shoot of this chick, Madonna, making a new video just down on Sunset. And Sean said, we could get in and check her out through the AD. So we did that. And we see that in 3D IMAX.
Yeah.
Of her sitting there being made up. And I get introduced, and she was very warm and smiled, the Madonna that I got to know. And then it was Sean, and she looked at him and became somebody else. She became a queen. And that was a button that she pushed in Sean that led to everything else. But so those two things were happening at the same time. And so I have photos, which I'll never publish since they'll be in the cloud of Madonna here in this house in the 80s, with her hair pulled back in a bun, eating Chinese food, some of it's dripping off of her mouth.
That's awesome.
I know. But what's interesting is that, so what year was that? That was before I made it Close Range. And so I remember only now that I started with her. And when I had met her then, she was living in an apartment east of here in Hollywood. And, it's happening in the present, so you don't really see it until it's 2022 and you look at YouTube and you see where she went from a video or from, like a Virgin on MTV to Sticky and Sweet Tour, and it's like, whoa.
So you're working with Sean Penn and you're doing At Close Range. How did Madonna's music get involved in the movie? Because you basically used Live to Tell all throughout that movie, which I thought was beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful song by her and Patrick Leonard. And I loved that you sort of used the score of that song throughout the score of your movie.
You're saying all the right things. because that was definitely my idea, very much resisted by the producers in the studio. I just love that song. And the history of it. It was written for another movie and blah, blah, blah. And she wasn't going to do it. And I remember her playing the song for me on a cassette. Yeah, a little cassette. And it was, as you know, famously, her vocal is a demo. She had no intention of singing it, but she thought it might be good for the film and some man should sing it. And I said, excuse me.
Yeah.
But it sounds pretty good. And I just reacted to that song as if it kind of, I'm not exaggerating. I realize now it went into my ears, into my blood, and the DNA of the song and of the movie in my head intermixed. So that music became everything. And Pat Leonard, who had never scored a movie, I asked him to do it and to use all the different variations of that. And in the beginning, he was a little resistant because, he's a composer. He doesn't want to keep on being limited to the same. But I think what he did, and I'm not a musician, but the way he used that stuff, that for me, when I watched it put together, it's like all the score was like a tease intro to the song that hits in the end, which to me, that's an orgasm on many levels. And so, and then the video, but this is happening at the same time because famously we're down in Tennessee, Franklin, Tennessee, shooting at Close Range while they're together for the first time. And suddenly they're like our 1,000 paparazzi in Franklin, Tennessee, and famously Sean hitting one of them. Wow. So they're just together. So, actors have their trailers where they wait. And it was like, okay, I say to the AD, go get Sean, we're ready. And sometimes he didn't come right away. And the AD involved in knocking on the door was saying, I don't think I think he's busy right now.
It's not the time. Yes.
Yeah, so all that was going on at the same time. It led to just an ongoing whatever happened next.
So let me ask you, so while you were doing the movie, is that when the conversation of directing Madonna in the Live to Tell video came up? Is that how that relationship got forged?
I don't exactly remember, but there was going to be a video, and at the time it was, if there were videos for movies, you would intercut footage from the movie. And so I had this idea of wanting her, which don't tell anybody, but it's kind of a repeat of Papa Don't Preach in that you're intermixing her as Madonna with other stuff.
Yeah.
And in this case, God, did I send you that thing that just recently
You
got
did,
published?
Yes, it was very funny.
No, yeah, but no, the anniversary of the video, I have to subsequently send it to you, that was on Instagram, of stuff I was not aware of art critics over the years talking about the genius of the video and her interaction as if she is speaking to the character, not to Sean Penn, but
interesting.
to Brad. And I thought, whoa, it's highfalutin. But I've made a bunch of stuff, and some stuff is more famous, like Glengarry. Of everything, there are only certain things that are mine, 100% mine, like every shot, every idea. And among them is, of course, Live to Tell, since every image in Live to Tell was something that was from my mind.
Right.
And I had this wonderful relationship with her where on all three videos, it was no record company was allowed to come anywhere close to it. And she was on some drug where she thought I knew what I was doing. And so she loved the movie. And so we did that. And the one thing was her showing up, or I saw it beforehand, in that look that she had, which when I first saw her in like a dress like my grandmother would wear.
Yeah. That was
my first reaction was, whoa, you know what you're doing. I didn't say that. Thank God. Because she sure did. But when I think about that, that's one of the things where it's my video and everything, but it was her choice to appear in that dress with her hair like that.
Right.
And it is so perfect that I consider that video and Papa Don't Preach as two of my best, most personal cinematic things. Because Papa Don't Preach is literally in Staten Island. Because we were talking about it. I remember up at Warner Brothers for some reason, and I was young. I had an Alfa Romeo convertible, and we're sitting there, and she's eating candy, loves candy. And where should we shoot it? I say Staten Island. She goes, Staten Island? Why? And I said, because I grew up there. I went to high school there. And if I go back and make a video with you, everyone I went to high school with will know. And she did that classic spitting out her candy. She thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And as you know, we wound up going to Staten Island, and it cost an extra, she never told me, but an extra like $75,000, which she was paying for out of her pocket and when nobody else was. Usually the record company pays, but she paid for it and owns the copyright. And so every shot in Papa Don't Preach is my life in Staten Island. And most dramatically now, I look at the opening when she's walking, and there are the Twin Towers. And that the Twin Towers appear twice in the video. Anyway, Papa Don't Preach is much more a James Foley film than Glengarry Glen Ross. And as for True Blue, I definitely like it, but it was, because you remember, it wasn't even supposed to be on MTV. It was like make my video. And nobody wanted to spend any money. It's like, it was $50,000. We're in New York. Can you think of anything we can do? And we came up with that. But now I look at it, and it's kind of cool. But I don't think it rises to the level of Papa or Live to Tell. And it's interesting because I did a close range, and I was the director. And just because Sean got me the job, he was totally respectful of me as the director. He never threw his weight around. And simultaneously, she's saying, I'm making my next video. you want to do it. And I just made up what it was, and she did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, was it Jeff Aroff? All these people from Warner Brothers are like, they want to know what it is, and it's a really big, important thing. And she's like, don't talk to them. And they were not allowed to know anything about it or come anywhere close to it. And I'll leave off with something that, to me, is so personal as the fucking Staten Island ferry, which if you grow up in Staten Island and you're interested in seeing a movie, you have to take the ferry and go up to the Upper East Side to see a movie. So the ferry, but we've realized we had to rent a ferry. So we bought it and shot it, and then we're finished. And I remember an AD saying, the captain wants to see you. I go up there, and he says, well, you got 2 hours left. Where do you want to go? We're in New York Harbor. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you want to go up the river? You want to go this way? And that was just overwhelming to me, that ferry you could drive around. We had a rap party on the ferry.
Oh, nice.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
It was.
So we're commemorating the 35th anniversary of Who's That Girl with this August. 35th.
Unbelievable.
And now
Times Square. How about that footage? That blows my mind.
Yeah.
The premiere in Times Square, which I had no idea existed. YouTube is the greatest thing ever.
How did Who's That Girl, the film, come to be?
Asked by this man called Roger Birnbaum, who was a producer, who had this script called Slammer, and they wanted Madonna in it, and I had made Reckless, which was a flop, and At Close Range, which was critically. So the idea of me directing a fucking comedy was absurd. But in the world of Hollywood, they wanted Madonna, and they knew my connection to her, so they were happy to have me. And I felt the script was in need of a lot of work, and I talked to her, and we both agreed. And it's Warner Brothers, so we're hiring writers. And but the honest truth is, we had a start date because she had her tour planned. Sure. So we had to start shooting, and we had hired writers, and I'll never forget the final draft of the script came in, and I'm in New Jersey, and it's humid, and at the writer's house, and I'm reading it, and I did not like it. And which is why I feel so good decades later. But, I'm doing it, so your mind goes into, I'm doing this the best I possibly can. And the shooting of it was just, and I see footage I've never seen from behind the scenes, because you only see what you see outwards. You see crowds and stuff on Fifth Avenue, and Donald Trump. I mean, I just saw on YouTube a behind the scenes thing of our shooting on Fifth Avenue, and there's police barricades and all these people. And then there's Donald fucking Trump, who wanted a picture with Madonna. And and if you watch any of these, I'll send you some links. What I love is you see our relationship, and it is so relaxed. And even a photo I've never seen before, it shows up on Instagram, and I'm tagged in it. I don't know who took it, but it's in between shots of Who's That Girl. She's in costume. We're sitting on the bumper of a Rolls Royce having a conversation, just the two of us. And I say this with honesty. I've never seen that picture. First of all, I'm incredibly young. I'm incredibly handsome, which I wish somebody had told me. But what amazes me, and I'm being honest, is she's sitting there and she's looking at me, and I'm doing the talking, and my body language is so relaxed, and she's listening. My first reaction is, fuck, it's Madonna. And she's listening to me, which is something you don't experience at the moment.
You're right.
But there's even all these little things where in the middle of shooting, she gets an award for Papa as the biggest video in the world. So they want to come in and shoot it. And she's talking and being funny. And whoever's talking to her said, "What? Best video? What? You hear that, Jamie?" And I hear my voice. And to hear her say, "You hear that, Jamie?" You hear my voice is like, whoa, I'm watching some alternate history movie of my life. But we had our relationship was always incredibly direct, warm, and funny, and I really of. And another thing about the plague, you start thinking about who are your friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And though I've not seen you in a million years, of all the people I've met in my life, there are a small number of people who I feel I really love. And now to look back, because when it's happening, you don't take it in. But to look back and see her now that I knew her,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and she's the same person, and she looks different. But when I listen to her every once in a while, I hear that same woman who spit out her candy at the idea of shooting in Staten Island, talking with this accent outside Detroit. So I got nothing but love for her and respect artistically that is off the charts. I actually won a bet. I shouldn't embarrass him, but Ed Burns, if you know who Ed Burns is, and he's in Confidence, and he is actually one of my friends, and I'll never forget. I don't know what year it was, but something came on, and it was about the Hall of Fame, who was going to be inducted. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Somebody mentioned Madonna. Eddie didn't know her at all, and I had to deal with that with friends who didn't know her. They only knew her from TV, right. And mostly women were very easy to sit down at lunch and launch into a tirade against her. And I said, "Excuse me, no, she's a real person and a friend of mine. You've never met her. Mm-hmm. You only sing her." But anyway, Eddie, I said she's going to get inducted, and Eddie said that's ridiculous and bet me $1,000. Only bet I ever did. And of course, got inducted. I got the check and I sent it back. But that was however long that was. And recently I saw him and he laughed and he said, "Well, if I knew then, well, I knew now."
Yeah. So I want to ask real quick. So at the time you were directing Who's That Girl? Obviously, Madonna's True Blue album, just like she was one of the biggest pop stars on the planet at the time. You were filming on the streets of New York City. What was that craziness like, filming with Madonna and a tiger?
A cougar.
Cougar.
And a quick aside, with my new awakenings, it's like the way we treat animals and the whole idea of SeaWorld, all that disgusts me, and my memory of my beloved mother being nice and taking us to Madison Square Garden to Ringling Brothers Circus so we could sit there as humans and watch an elephant being whipped. I mean, the whole thing repulses me. So I'm just about to use my Instagram thing where I got followers of all these crazy women globally who on a daily basis demand that I release the uncut version of 50. It does not exist. And I want to say, guys, it's been a while, get a life.
Yeah.
But
let's clear the air right now.
Yeah. There's an audience, so I wanted to say something about animal. And somehow something came across my face. It was behind the scene things, and it was about what you're talking about. What is it like to shoot with this cougar? And I thought, my God, I'm the guiltiest person on the planet using this animal to amuse humans. Right. So I realized I better not go there. But it was great. But what is fascinating is to see now the making of it, because, for instance, on Fifth Avenue in front of Trump Tower, this picture is me and her standing there waiting, and you see all these barricades of the bridge and tunnel people, if you know who that is. Yep. And I look out, and I see my sister behind one of those barricades. So I walk up. There's tens of thousands of people, and my sister won't hear this, but and I said, "What are you doing here? Come on, meet Madonna." And she was no. She was too scared. But again, I'm looking out at the people. I never saw what it looked like to be in the crowd looking back. Mm-hmm. And it's cinematic in a way, because that's what you want to do with cinema, to show something from a different point of view. Mm-hmm. So that experience and seeing this long thing of the animal trainers, and I had forgotten there were sharpshooters up in buildings, and it was a big thing. But I do remember being aware that the trainer said, it's a wild animal. And in one scene, and who's that girl, when she appears before the board of this highfalutin building.
Yes. The co-op.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I love that scene. And
yeah, so cool.
But the scene was the cougar is sitting next to her. And I'm aware, because the animal people, that cougar could just turn and bite her thigh off.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous about it. And she acted like it was no problem at all, but later confided she was not unaware. But
wow.
It was such a great thing. But I didn't know who she was yet, because time hadn't passed, and I had met her when she's living in an apartment, Hollywood Boulevard. So. And then she bought her first place in Central Park West, and had no furniture in it. It just was happening. Mm-hmm. But when things happen, they happen in real time. So suddenly I go from her sitting there eating Chinese food, and I'm at that concert outside of Paris, the one where there's like 100,000 people or something. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was like a VIP thing behind a chain link fence, and Sylvester Stallone is back there. But the crowds were so big, I freaked out, and I went backstage and I watched it from there. Wow. But I'm watching the back of her in this crowd, so I never saw it until I saw it on YouTube from a helicopter shot, and I thought I was there. But the fact that I didn't realize how fast it had happened, and how to see, because I watch, it's wonderful, the tours that you can watch in stadiums and things. And you see the transition, and you see this woman who looks like, yes, I should be in front of 100,000 people, and they should be watching my every move. And my God, what tour was that? Where, Express Yourself.
Blonde Ambition.
My God, to see that in upraised. I just watched it, and the way she dances, the professionalism, and I realized she must have had to practice that a lot. But I never knew that. I never thought about that. But you watch it now, and I show it to younger people who have never seen it, who are so blown away by the sophistication and the absolute radicalness of the dance moves. And the sexuality, which is wrapped, there's no raunch, but it pushes the envelope, but she's dripping in glamour. Mm-hmm. But every single move and the empowerment of the song is, to me, breathtaking. How did she go from MTV Awards writhing on the stage to that in about 5 minutes?
Yeah. She was quick.
And I think,
was quick.
Well, what's always super fascinating is that is pre-internet, pre-social media, that this power that she, in a sense, wielded without maybe necessarily knowing. Perhaps she did. I'm just kind of going by conjecture, but
she learned.
She learned, right? But it was so it's even more captivating to me now to look at that type of star power and the rise. To me, that is, I mean, I hate to use the cliche rags to riches, but this sort of that the work and the grit, the ultimate do not give up. Whereas now it's like, if I don't have 100,000 followers by my 12th video, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah. And what is amazing is that I would like to get inside the head of somebody who just went so fast from what was the first one, the Like a Virgin tour. What was it called?
Virgin Tour.
The first tour was Like a Virgin Tour.
Yeah.
The Virgin Tour.
Yeah, and it's so small, but the progression is relentlessly up to a quality level. And I've watched all the tours, and I saw most of them, but I never saw the Sticky and Sweet. The whole, I think it was shot in South America or somewhere.
I think Argentina.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and now the whole thing of this helicopter shot of the stadium in Argentina, and she comes out and they scream, but she's there and she's walking around and I think to myself, because I was going to be a shrink, what is that like where you feel that it makes sense that these people are screaming to you? But what's amazing, she delivers the state of the art. There is no laziness. There is no staying in place. And nobody has done that. She just got changed and changed and changed. And, she's not doing whatever that's called, covers in Vegas of her hits.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. And then that ain't never going to happen.
No.
So, James, I want to ask, so speaking of star quality, you've been able to work with some incredible movie stars throughout your career: Halle Berry, Al Pacino, Jonathan Pryce, Dustin Hoffman, Bruce Willis, Gene Hackman. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, even more recently in 50 Shades, you got to work with Jamie Dornan, who I think is a total up-and-coming, huge mega star. Do you have any favorite memories from all of the films that you worked on, or any of the specific actors that you worked with?
All those people you mentioned, my great gift as a director, and I don't have other gifts that other directors have, but the one gift I have is I love actors. And I love good actors. And so for me, my relationship with the leads, more time, is always based on, I always get to know them before, and I cast them and I have to meet them. Do we connect? So when we show up on the set the first day, it's not like strangers. We already have a relationship that is exclusive. And I'm not one of those directors who would ever, if there were like 4 actors in a scene, stand there and yell out direction to somebody, because my direction has to do with that particular person.
Right.
And I don't want the other actor to know what's coming. But also what I learned, because in film school there was one class in directing actors from this idiot guy who had one of those shops on Hollywood Boulevard. And it was nothing. But what I learned and came to full fruition in Glengarry was that my job was not for the actor to learn my language, but for me to learn theirs. And in that movie, they all spoke different languages. And particularly Jack Lemmon and Al Pacino was like, one was speaking Greek and the other is speaking Arabic. So they can't hear what I'm saying to them. So each one I would have to talk in their language. And when I see photographs, I have one of me on the set, and there were pictures of me directing these actors, and for the life of me, my body language is I'm all confident and cool. And I think, whoa, I'm a good actor, because I didn't feel that. But I'm directing Jack Lemmon, and he's there, like Madonna's looking at me, and these actors are looking at me and listening to me. But I wasn't aware of it at the time.
Wow.
But I will say the one most, and it came back to me, and I will get through it concisely, and I will not cry. So many of these actors, I was warned by agents and producers. They're monsters. They're monsters. Everybody from Sean to Al, all difficult. Nobody was ever difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And Gene Hackman came with the worst reputation of his thing with directors, just crazy. And actually, Josh Donnan, David Fincher's partner, had produced this movie, The Quick and the Dead, starring Sharon Stone and a kid called Leo DiCaprio. And Gene came in for a week or something, and they had already been shooting, and it was directed by Sam Raimi, who famously, unlike me, has storyboards of the entire movie of every single shot. So it's Gene Hackman's first day, and Sam doesn't know him. He comes up to him, and he shows Gene drawings and says to Gene, so when you say this line, you with your right hand, you play. And Gene listened and said, can I see that? He took the book, and he threw it as far as he could and said, quote, you're out of your fucking mind. But that is something, that idea is insane to me, that you're telling Gene Hackman when to move. Anyway, so Gene Hackman comes and does The Chamber. We shoot for a week. It's Friday. I'm tired. I'm going to my car. And a PA comes up and says, Gene's asking if you could stop by his trailer before you leave. And my first reaction as a Catholic growing up, and he's going to scream at me for something. But I had to go, knock on the door, and he's a big star. He's got a huge trailer. He says, Jamie, he says, come in. And I open the door, and he is way at the other end, and he's half undressed. He was playing a guy in death row, and he's half undressed, and he doesn't come any closer, and he says in a very halting, shy way something like, I just wanted to say that it's been a great week, and I want you to know that. And I, at the time, of course, you're disconnected from your emotions. I say, oh, great, thanks. Closed the door, and I went home. And I swear to God, it was only a couple of years ago that I remembered that. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, for someone like Gene Hackman to tell me that he thought I was a good director, and for the reason I got into the Academy early was Jack Lemmon. For whatever reason, fucking Billy Wilder directed him, but he thought I should be in the Academy, and he praised me so much, and it takes a long time to let that sink in. Yeah. So at this point, thank God for media, where films just don't disappear. Yeah. Only now can I look back, and that movie, The Chamber, was a flop. But who gives a fuck? Gene Hackman.
Exactly.
Popeye Doyle. Because I never connected, I went up to the Upper East Side to watch French Connection or Serpico, A Dog Day After, or The Godfather. Because I knew Al. And when you're with Al in the kitchen, he's not Michael Corleone. Right. And you're not.
What?
And he's not. And the interesting thing, quickly, is I'm fascinated by fame, because a whole lot of famous people, I've been in this house, but fame doesn't exist unless there's fans.
Right.
So I can clearly remember I made that movie After Dark, My Sweet, and it was small budget. They didn't have money for a premiere, but the producer saying, if you can get Madonna to come. So I asked her as a favor. And I have a picture. It's that picture of her eating the food. Now it's time to go. She goes in this little bathroom, does this, and Google it, Madonna at the After Dark, My Sweet, and she turns into Madonna. And of course, there's a billion photographs of it. But when I think of that, nobody knows she's there because she's doing this for a friend, and she turned herself from Madonna Ciccone into this character, Madonna, to help my movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's amazing.
That makes me cry too.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, James, before we let you go, we like to do a little thing we like to call the lightning round. These are questions that the answers are just meant to be quick off the top of your head, wherever you're at in your Madonna journey today. Don't think too hard. Favorite Madonna song?
Hands down, Power of Goodbye.
Oh, good one.
Oh,
good one.
wow. Okay.
Yes.
Favorite Madonna music video? And yes, it can be one that you directed.
I have to say, Express Yourself.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
I mean, I think David's a genius. And that was wow. What else you got?
Favorite Madonna tour?
Sticky and Sweet, which I didn't see in person, but I saw the high def video of it. And I mean, when she does Vogue and Sticky and Sweet,
Yes.
it's like that's where you see the progression. I mean, every time she did Vogue, it was something brand new. And the Sticky and Sweet, the movements, wow.
Yeah, she was so athletic in that tour. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Favorite Madonna movie? And yes, it can be one that you directed.
No, it's Desperately Seeking Susan. It has to
Quintessential
be.
Madonna.
Yeah, I mean the blowing her armpits.
In Port Authority.
It's such a cool scene.
All right, last question. Favorite Madonna look? And it can be from a music video, a tour, a photo shoot, in person.
Well, there's a private photo I have, which was taken on the set of I Live to Tell, because Herb Ritz was there to shoot her. And it's very funny because we're leaving, and I knew Herb from her. And so we're leaving, and I said to Herb, take our picture. I put my arm around her, and only later did Madonna said something funny, like, because Herb went, because Herb Ritz is not a guy you ask to take a snapshot.
Right.
But,
just like the random picture.
But he did, and he just went like this, and it is the most beautiful picture. But that doesn't count. His picture, the cover of True Blue, that's
gorgeous.
That to me is the announcement of a goddess.
Yes.
And it was, God, it was beautiful. It is beautiful. And you look at it now and talk about iconic. Fuck.
Yeah. Nothing like it, really. That's
her,
before or since.
And the people, when I first met her, and Marty, her friend Marty Burgoyne,
Burgoyne.
Obviously, a bunch of people died on her. And I knew him, I knew Herb, and she has feelings, believe it or not.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
And when you share that with somebody, and then somebody's never met her sits down and trashes her like she's just this, has no emotions and is this creature called Madonna, and no doubts, But, in the beginning, when all of a sudden the cover of the New York News is "What a Tramp" and the release of the Penta, I mean, that was real.
Yeah. And it's something that I think a lot of people forget about because of the larger than life persona.
Yes.
Sometimes people forget that there's an actual human attached.
Madonna, I always say Madonna is a character created by a real person, Madonna Ciccone, who has insecurities and everything else. Yeah. But people don't know that. And I always ask, what's her last name? And nobody knows. I say, how many real people do you know that have no last name and have no insecurities and always looks beautiful? People are idiots. Except me.
Yeah. No, of course. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us this insight and for just kind of taking us a little bit down memory lane and giving us a little bit of a different view.
By the way, all bullshit aside, I have listened, not to every episode, but I know your podcast. And
Thank you.
And once in a while, it touched on something I was involved with, and it was really accurate. So, props to you.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you. That's a big compliment. We appreciate that you've taken some time to listen, because for us, this is mostly Stefan. He's the man behind the sort of the Wizard of Oz, if you will, behind the curtain.
He seems to know a lot.
He does know so much, and he works tirelessly to give to always put a light on the story of Madonna.
Yes,
because it's really difficult to find that.
Yes, yeah, and what I like
that space.
It seems very informative and real. Nothing is fawning. There's obviously obvious respect, but there's no hagiography where you're acting more like a fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're a fan, but you're digging into the reality of what's behind that artistic accomplishment.
Yes,
ongoing.
We are here to pay reverence.
Yes. And I appreciate it, as do lots of people.
Yeah, and I will echo Liberty's comments. James, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on the show today. This was wonderful. I can't thank you enough for being involved in Who's That Girl? I know that might have been a source of contention, having it not been well received at the time. But as Liberty said, as a 10-year-old little boy, I was in love with that movie, and I still am to this day. Mm-hmm. Tell all of our listeners where they can find you online.
You can find me on Instagram at Director James Foley, and on Facebook I have a Foley Film Inc. account as well as a Jamie Foley account. Yeah, I'm very proud of my Instagram. I think about what I put on Instagram, and the only time I got flack was I'm a acolyte of Michelle Obama, and there was a clip of her talking so eloquently, and what I always love about her is that she's decked out in Gucci or something, looking beautiful and speaking with intelligence, and I posted it and said, we should establish a monarchy and make her the queen. And I found out not all my followers are Michelle Obama fans, but fuck them.
Fuck them, that's right. There you go.
Well, and everyone, remember, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at MLVC Podcast. If you'd like to donate to the podcast on Venmo, at MLVC Podcast, or think about becoming a subscriber on Patreon to help keep this podcast going, patreon.podbean.com/MLVC Podcast. James, thank you so much again. This was wonderful. Liberty, thank you.
Thank you both. And when I hear my podcast, then I'll go in onto those sites and make my contribution, depending on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys. Thank you.